Tell me how you got your high-profile gigs with the Alan Parsons.
2 words: Godfrey Townsend.
Okay.
We met. I went to see John Entwistle, the John Entwistle Band at Tramps.
And he was in the band.
He was in the band. I just knew it was the John Entwistle Band. And again, I was so naive, thinking that like all of the English rock stars lived together in a big house
in the castle
somewhere. Yeah. So like, I go to see. There's just to kiss the ring, see this guy in person. It might have been 1996 or 95,
right, started touring
something like that, in this tiny place. And I see this guitar player on stage with him, and I didn't hear him speak, so I didn't know that he was American. I thought, because on the guitar, Godfrey Townsend, no relation. And I thought this was one of his English rock buddies from, so. Through the grapevine, I find out that this Godfrey Townsend guy lives in New York. And I'm like, okay, well, Sting's got a place in New York. It's not unusual for an English guy to live in New York. So I get a call to do an open mic gig. Our friend Lisa Miller, I have to give her the credit.
Calico Jacks?
Calico Jacks, correct. She goes, she had the Tuesday night jam thing, and I got the call to do the house band thing.
Okay.
You play 4 songs, hang out the rest of the night while everybody comes up and, and I arrive and Lisa's like, I got great news. Godfrey's going to be playing with us tonight. I'm like, oh, cool. I want to meet this guy. This is going to be fun. The van pulls up. He gets out. Hey, man, how you doing? I'm like, what happened to your accent? He goes, what accent? What are you talking about? Your English accent's gone. He's like, what English accent? What are you talking about? I said, where are you from? He goes, I'm from Queens. I'm like, you're from Queens? He said, yeah. Why? Would you think I was English? I'm like, yeah, I saw you with Entwistle at Tramps. And so we had a laugh over that. And then we started playing, and he was the first guy that I met that knew all the Cream and Zeppelin and Beatles, and we knew the same stuff, and we hit it off. And then he started calling me to do stuff at Cano's Swiss Tavern and places like that in Lynbrook. And so we would do things together. And then one night, I was at La Barbat. This was when Richie Cannata's Monday Night Jam was at La Barbat. It moved around quite a few times. I had just quit. I'd been in a wedding band for about 7 years, and I had just reached my breaking point of great musicians I was working with, great people. I just couldn't take the catering industry anymore. I said, this is the catering industry. I want to be in the music industry. There's got to be more than, I was 30, wasn't married, didn't own a house, didn't have anything really tying me down. If I'm going to take a leap of faith, it's got to be right now. Quit the band with nothing to fall back on, doing instead of doing 1 gig for $400, I would do 4 gigs for $100. So there was a period of me doing a lot of that, right? And one morning I took a walk. You'll appreciate why I'm going to the story. It was a new life for me. I didn't know what was happening. So I would get up and do these power walks. And I took a walk. I was living in Midwood at the time in Brooklyn. I walked to Avenue U and East 21st Street. There was a CD store. I wander into the CD store and I hear this song, Time Flowing Like a River. And I hadn't heard this song since the 80s. And I went into a daze, like that Seinfeld episode when the guy hears Desperado and he goes, and I go to the guy behind, I was like, is that Pink Floyd? He goes, no, that's the Alan Parsons project. And I went, oh, right, okay. Now, by this point, I knew Godfrey. I knew Godfrey was doing the Walk Down Abbey Road tours with Alan Parsons. And I went, yeah, Alan Parsons project, Time, okay. So I made a mental note. He didn't have the CD in the store. So I said, I made a mental note, I got to get the CD with Time on it. I go to J&R Music World, rest in peace. Yes. And they've got, The only CD in there that's got time on it is the Definitive Collection. It's a 2 CD best of. It's $20. I had about $20 left to my name at that moment until my next gig, which was going to be on it. I didn't know when. And I just said, fuck it, I want this song now. And I spent literally like the last money I had, and I brought it home, and I just sat. I did something I hadn't done since I was a teenager, sat and listened to one song over and over again, because it just rediscovered like the transcendent power of music to just be like, you know. And then I started listening to the rest of the album, and I was like, yeah, this is good shit. Okay. 2 weeks later, 3 weeks later, I don't know, Godfrey sidles up to me at La Barbat. We're in La Barbat, hanging out, waiting for my chance to get up and play, you know, 18 choruses of a slow blues in G. You know, because there's like horn players all lined up that are each going to take 3 choruses. Of course. And Godfrey sees me across the room. He comes over with a purpose, and he sidles up to me. How'd you like to be in the Alan Parsons project? And I just started laughing at him, because I was like, because I knew his connection to him, and the fact that I had just spent the last money I had on this CD, I just started laughing, and I was like, tell me more. And he basically explained his Alan's living in the States. He's putting he wants an American touring band, because I guess the English guys, it's too expensive to bring them over. Immigration. And I'm like, I didn't even know what to say, because at this point I had only really worked with like, you know, indie artists here in New York. Not knocking them, but you know, there's a lot of talented players, a lot of really cool situations. But I had never passed through like the membrane of like my record collection into that reality with those people. I hadn't done that yet. Stage, yeah, exactly. And it was like, well, look, here's the phone number of the office. Call the office, and they'll tell you what's happening. I call the office, and hello, this is Alan. And I, you know, again, Beatles, Let It Be, Abbey Road, Alan Parsons. I'm
royalty.
Yeah. And he's like, oh yes, Godfrey mentioned you. Yes. So if you could send a CD with some of your singing on it, just so I hear where your voice is. And what I realized was he wanted everyone in the band was going to sing. Steve Murphy was the drummer, the aforementioned Steve Murphy, Manny Focarazzo on keys. And Godfrey, it was interesting because Godfrey pitched the gig to me as, it's going to be me, you, Steve Murphy, and Manny Focarazzo. And I was like, yeah, okay. That's going to be a killer lineup. I'd seen Steve play a few times, hadn't met him yet, but I knew somehow this was going to be a killer band.
Wow.
And that I was going to be doing some singing, and it was going to really be something. Besides the weight of like, I'm going to meet...
You're on the world stage.
I'm going to meet the man that put the windscreen on the mics for the rooftop concert, right? And Eye in the Sky, you know, not
a shabby resume.
Right, exactly. So I somehow burned him a CD in 2002.
Yes,
you know,
how did you do that?
I had an iMac with a CDR drive on it, and I made an iTunes playlist. You know how you had to do it in those days before, just like, oh, well, I'll just, here's the link to my SoundCloud. There was none of that.
Right.
It's still, yeah. So I found some stuff that I had sung on, sent it to him, mailed it to him in an envelope with a stamp, you know.
Primitive.
By that point, I had done enough, you know, Christmas parties to pay for a stamp, you know. And then didn't hear anything. And then one day I come home I wish I had my answering machine from those days.
Yes.
Hello, John, it's Alan Parsons. Just want to know what your beverage preferences are. We're putting the rider together backstage, so if you like beer or wine or whatever, just let us know. I was like, beverages? I guess I've got the gig. I don't know. And so we flew out to Reno, Nevada to play John Asquaga's Nugget. We flew out on a Tuesday. We rehearsed in the theater Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And then the shows were Friday, Saturday. And that was the beginning of the whole shebang. I mean, by this point, we'd had a rehearsal at Cano's Swiss Tavern with, where I knew Manny already, I'd met Steve, and the four of us learned up his set. thank God I had the definitive collection.
Excellent.
It was like 90% of the set list was on the greatest hits.
Of course.
Right? And what I always tell people is, Steve and Manny and Godfrey and I went on to do Hippie Fest, Happy Together, Walk Down Abbey Road, all of these package tours where there were like a bunch of artists. So within 2 hours, we would have to become the Turtles, Three Dog Night, Gary Lewis and the Playboys, Mitch Ryder and the Detroit Wheels, Christopher Cross, Todd Rundgren, all of these people, the Cowsills. We would have to replicate this music authentically, but still relate to each other and the audience in the present moment.
I don't think people realize how hard a gig that is because
they don't.
Every note on those records. You can't deviate from
No, they don't. No. Yeah, but again, when you're
such a big fan.
When you're a geek like me,
yes,
it's
it's not work.
It's not, well, I mean, it's
work, but
it's work in the sense that like you need to get everything under your fingers, yes, but then you also, my number one priority is to make a pocket with Steve, right? So things would happen like, there'd be a handful of artists on one of these tours, and generally one of us in the band was the expert on that particular artist.
Okay.
So when we did Walk Down Abbey Road and Denny Lane was on, okay, those guys were vaguely familiar with the Wings stuff. But I was like a Wings like savant. You know what I mean? Because like when I was in junior high school, I had no friends. I was a scrawny kid who was bad at sports. I got picked on a lot. My only friends were Paul McCartney and Denny Lane and Linda.
Right, so
those Wings albums were,
sure.
So I remember Murphy calling me and being like, dude, who the fuck is playing drums on Band on the Run? These are some of the most illogical drum fills I've ever heard. Who is that? I'm like, that's Paul. Goes, what? Yeah, like there's a fill leading into the second verse, like that doesn't resolve. He's like, who is that? I'm like, it's Paul. So, and a great moment was when we rehearsed with Denny Lane for that. He shows up at like sound check to rehearse. I'm like, hey, how are you? He was like a little kind of suspicious.
Yeah.
He didn't know who we were. So, and I'm like, hello, putting on my professional, nice to meet you face, while inside I'm like, right? So we just live and let die, boom. We go like that, and I see Denny do this. He's like, so I was like, all right, we're in.
Passed the audition.
Correct. But the Parsons stuff was so dense with parts and so specific that you had to more or less learn.
Yeah, because the composition of the parts have something to do with the composition.
Yeah, and everyone asks me, what did you learn working with Alan Parsons? I didn't really talk production with him apart from, there'd be one or two little exchanges. I remember at lunch one day, it was like, I said, wow, like all these parts like really connect with each other. Like they build, they intersect with each other, that there's like a framework that's so delicate that like everything fits in with each other. Nothing is stepping on each other, and it's like you take
every
one.
Note means something.
Every note means something. Is yes. Well, that's the job of the producer, isn't
it? You can catch additional episodes and much more by visiting us on the web at knowyourbassplayer.com. Thank you for joining us today, and we will see you next time here on Know Your Bass Player.